It was during what should have been a routine interview at the Jordan Brand headquarters in Chicago that Michael Jordan made a declaration about Steph Curry so unexpected and powerful that his own advisors were visibly surprised. The words that came from the mouth of the man, considered by many the greatest player of all time, not only broke decades of calculated caution, but would forever redefine how the world sees greatness in modern basketball. Robert Kim, Senior Vice President of Jordan Brand, who had worked alongside Jordan for more than 15 years, had never seen the boss speak with such emotional conviction about another NBA player. The tone of voice, the body posture, the intensity in his eyes, everything indicated that Jordan was about to reveal truths he had kept for years, perhaps decades. "You want to know the truth about Steph Curry?" Jordan said to Jennifer Walsh, the ESPN journalist conducting the interview, interrupting a question about athletic footwear trends. "Then, I'll tell you the truth that nobody wants to hear, but that needs to be said. Can you perceive that there are moments in sports history where a single declaration has the power to rewrite entire narratives, silence debates that lasted years, and force even the most stubborn critics to reconsider their fundamental positions?" To completely understand why Michael Jordan's words about Steph Curry would cause such impact, why they would silence the critics so definitively, we need to go back to the beginning of a complex relationship between two completely different eras of basketball, two seemingly opposite philosophies about greatness, and two men who represent peaks of excellence separated by decades but united by something much deeper than statistics. It was 2009, and Steph Curry was beginning his journey at Davidson College, dazzling the world with impossible shots that challenged all conventional logic about the game of basketball. Michael Jordan then focused on consolidating his business empire and sporting legacy, watched from afar that skinny young man who was redefining what it meant to be impossible to stop on a court. "That kid plays a different kind of basketball," Jordan had commented to Robert Kim during one of the first times they watched Curry highlights in March Madness. But there was something cautious in the way Jordan spoke, not contempt, but a calculated reserve that would become his trademark when discussing players of the next generation. The aroma of morning coffee mixed with the sound of ESPN playing in the Jordan Brand offices, where Michael spent mornings analyzing sports market trends and, inevitably, commenting on the current state of the NBA. But during all those years, his opinions about Steph Curry remained carefully guarded, expressed only in private conversations with trusted advisors. MJ was always criterious with public praise. Robert Kim frequently explained to new employees, he believes that recognition should be earned not just through talent, but through longevity, championships, and lasting impact on the game. What most impresses is how established legends frequently maintain emotional distance from emerging stars, not out of petty competitiveness, but out of profound understanding that true greatness can only be validated by the relentless test of time. During Curry's first years in the NBA, Jordan observed his evolution with the clinical interest of someone who intimately understood the pressures and expectations that accompany extraordinary potential. When Curry won his first MVP in 2015, Jordan made only diplomatic and respectful comments in public interviews. "Curry is a talented player who is having significant impact on the game," Jordan said during a press conference that year. Precise, measured words that revealed respect without total emotional commitment. But in the private offices of Jordan Brand, conversations were different. Michelle Carter, a sports marketing consultant who worked regularly with the company, frequently heard Jordan analyzing specific aspects of Curry's game with the same intense interest he demonstrated when studying competitors during his own career. He understands court spacing better than players with 15 years of experience, Jordan said to Michelle during a meeting in 2016. And he has something that can't be taught: perfect timing. Not just for shots, but for decisive moments. How is it possible that genuine recognition can coexist with public caution, creating a dynamic where true admiration remains hidden behind calculated diplomacy? As the years passed and Curry continued accumulating achievements, multiple MVPs, championships, records that seemed impossible, Jordan maintained his public posture of distant respect. But those close to him noticed subtle changes in how he spoke about the Warriors player. Jordan began using a different word, Robert Kim remembered. Years later, instead of talented or skillful, he began using special. For MJ, that's an important distinction. In 2017, when Curry led the Warriors to their second consecutive championship, Jordan watched the finals with interest that went beyond casual observation. Jennifer Walsh, who had interviewed Jordan several times over the years, noticed a subtle change in his body language when Curry was mentioned. There was less resistance, she observed, as if he were gradually accepting that he was witnessing something truly extraordinary. During an interview that year, when asked about comparisons between his era and the modern era, Jordan made a comment that went unnoticed by many, but revealed a significant evolution in his thinking. "The game evolves," he said simply, "and some players don't just adapt to that evolution. They lead it." Can you perceive that sometimes the most significant declarations are those that seem simple on the surface, but carry emotional weight and recognition that can only be fully understood by those who intimately know the person who pronounces them? In 2018, when Curry won his third championship, something fundamentally changed in how Jordan spoke about him in private conversations. Michelle Carter was present during a meeting when Jordan made an observation that completely surprised her. "Curry isn't just playing basketball," Jordan said, pausing to choose his words carefully. "He's redefining what's possible, and he's doing it with a combination of skill, intelligence, and leadership that is rare." For Jordan to use the word rare about another player was almost unprecedented. Robert Kim, who had known Jordan for decades, later described that moment as the first real sign that Jordan's private opinion about Curry was evolving into something far beyond professional respect. But still, publicly, Jordan maintained his characteristic caution. When interviewers tried to extract direct comparisons or more emphatic declarations, he consistently deflected to diplomatic comments about different eras and unique playing styles. "MJ always said that words have weight," Robert Kim explained, "especially his words. He wasn't going to make declarations he couldn't completely sustain with total conviction." It's impossible not to feel admiration when we understand how true leaders comprehend the power of their words and choose the timing of their declarations with surgical precision, knowing that genuine recognition from established legends can transform careers and entire sporting narratives. In 2019, during the playoffs where Curry led the Warriors through a sequence of games that defied rational explanation, Jordan watched with interest that his advisors described as genuine fascination. He was taking notes, Michelle Carter remembered, literally writing observations about specific plays, leadership decisions, moments where Curry demonstrated composure under pressure. It was like watching a master studying another master. But it was during the 2021 to 2022 season, when Curry broke Ray Allen's historic three-point shooting record, that Jordan had a reaction that surprised even his closest advisors. "That wasn't luck or just skill," Jordan said to Robert Kim after watching the historic game. "That was inevitability." Curry didn't break a record. He reached a destiny that was written from the first three-point shot he made at Davidson. The choice of the word inevitability revealed a profound understanding that Jordan rarely expressed about other athletes. It was as if he had finally accepted that he was witnessing not just exceptional talent, but indisputable historical greatness. What most impresses is how true legends eventually recognize when they are witnessing something that transcends generational comparisons, something that deserves to be celebrated regardless of eras, styles, or personal philosophies about the game. During 2022 and early 2023, those close to Jordan noticed an even more significant change. He began mentioning Curry spontaneously in conversations that had nothing to do with basketball, using him as an example of excellence, perseverance, and transformative impact. Jordan began talking about Curry the way he talked about Magic and Larry, Jennifer Walsh observed, with the kind of respect he reserved only for players he had faced personally and who had earned his admiration through direct battles. But there were critics, many critics, who continued questioning Curry's place in basketball's historical hierarchy. Analysts who diminished his achievements, former players who suggested he couldn't have succeeded in earlier eras, commentators who reduced his greatness to just three-point shots. And it was exactly this persistent narrative of devaluation that finally motivated Jordan to break years of diplomatic caution and speak with brutal honesty about what he really thought about Steph Curry. How is it possible that sometimes we need opposition and unfair criticism to motivate public recognition of truths we had already known privately for years? Jordan's decision to speak openly wasn't impulsive. For weeks before the historic interview, he had discussed with Robert Kim and other close advisors about it's time to put some things in perspective. MJ was tired of hearing people diminish something he recognized as genuine greatness, Robert Kim would explain later. He felt he had responsibility, as someone who intimately understands what greatness really means, to speak the truth. On the morning of the interview that would change everything, Jordan arrived at the Jordan Brand offices with a determination his employees hadn't seen in years. It wasn't anger or frustration. It was absolute clarity about a message that needed to be delivered. Today, I'm going to say some things I should have said a long time ago, he told Robert Kim while preparing for the interview. About Curry, about greatness, about what really matters in this game. True greatness recognizes greatness, regardless of era or style. And sometimes that recognition requires courage to challenge established narratives and speak truths that may be uncomfortable for those who prefer artificial divisions between generations. When Jennifer Walsh arrived to conduct the interview, she expected a routine conversation about business and sports trends. But there was something different in Jordan's energy, a focused intensity that suggested he had something important to say, something he had been keeping for too long. Before we begin, Jordan said to Jennifer, I want to make clear that today I'm going to speak some truths that might surprise people, especially about Steph Curry. Jennifer immediately felt she was about to witness something historic. Jordan's tone, his posture, the way he pronounced Curry's name. Everything indicated that years of diplomatic caution were about to give way to total honesty. And when Jordan finally began speaking about Steph Curry with complete honesty, his words would not only surprise critics, they would silence them completely, forever redefining how the world sees greatness in basketball and proving that genuine recognition among legends has the power to transform entire narratives. The sound of the ball going through the net, that emotional anchor that connects all basketball eras through pure technical perfection, was about to gain new meaning through the words of a man who understood better than anyone what separates talent from greatness, skill from lasting legacy. True greatness recognizes greatness, regardless of era or style. And sometimes that recognition needs to be expressed publicly so the world can completely understand what it's witnessing. During the 15 minutes that preceded the historic moment when Michael Jordan would finally reveal his true impressions about Steph Curry, Robert Kim observed a subtle but significant transformation in the posture of the man he had known for decades. Jordan wasn't nervous. Legends don't get nervous. But there was a focused determination in his movements, as if he were preparing to deliver a message he had been mentally refining for years. "Robert," Jordan said while adjusting the microphone for the interview, "do you remember that conversation we had in 2019 about Curry? About how some people can't see greatness when it presents itself differently than what they're used to?" Robert remembered perfectly. It had been during the playoffs that year, after Curry had a performance that defied logical explanation, that Jordan had made deeper private observations about the Warriors player than anything he had said publicly. "I remember," Robert responded. "You said you were watching someone rewrite the rules of what's possible on a basketball court." "Exactly," Jordan confirmed. "And today I'm going to explain what I really meant by that. Can you perceive that sometimes the most important truths are those we keep in private conversations for years, refining our understanding until we're ready to express them with total clarity and maximum impact? To completely understand the magnitude of the revelations Jordan was about to make, it's crucial to understand that during all those years of public diplomatic caution, he had been conducting a deep and meticulous analysis of every aspect of Steph Curry's game, not as a critic or competitor, but as a student of greatness in its purest form. Jennifer Walsh had interviewed Jordan several times over the years, but had never seen him with such focused intensity. When she asked if he was prepared to begin, Jordan made a pause that lasted almost 10 seconds, enough time to choose not just words, but the exact tone that would carry decades of careful observation. "Jennifer," Jordan said, "I'm going to tell you some things about Steph Curry that I've never said publicly. Not because I didn't believe them, but because I knew that when I finally said them, they would need to be irrefutable." During the first part of the interview, Jordan spoke about business, about the evolution of Jordan Brand, about trends in sports marketing. But Jennifer noticed there was contained energy, as if he were building momentum for something bigger. "Let's talk about basketball," Jennifer finally said, "specifically about how you see the game today compared to your era." It was at that moment that Jordan leaned forward, assuming the posture that Robert Kim had learned to recognize as a sign that important declarations were about to be made. "The basketball I see today," Jordan began, "is fundamentally different from the game I played. Not better or worse, different. And there's a specific player who personifies this evolution in a way that forces even people like me to recognize that we're witnessing something extraordinary. What most impresses is how true legends eventually understand that greatness can manifest in ways that challenge their own experiences, requiring intellectual humility to recognize excellence even when it contradicts previous conceptions about how success should look." "Steph Curry," Jordan continued, "did something that few athletes in history have managed to do. He didn't just dominate the game, he transformed it. And he did it not through physical imposition or intimidation, but through something much rarer: revolutionary vision combined with perfect execution." Jennifer immediately felt she was witnessing something historic. Jordan's tone, the specific choice of words like revolutionary and transformed. This wasn't language he used lightly. "For years," Jordan revealed, "I watched Curry break records that seemed unbreakable. win games in ways that contradicted everything we thought we knew about, basketball strategy, and lead teams through pressure that destroys players with twice his experience. Michelle Carter, who had been present during some of the private conversations Jordan had about Curry over the years, knew these words represented years of careful analysis finally being expressed publicly. In 2016, Jordan continued, after Curry had that historic unanimous MVP season, I had a conversation with Ahmad Rashad where I said something I've never repeated publicly until today. "What did you say?" Jennifer asked, knowing intuitively she was about to hear something significant. "I said that Curry was doing things on the court that I had never seen in my life. Not just impossible shots. Anyone can get lucky sometimes. Curry was demonstrating an understanding of time, space, and psychological pressure that rivaled anything Magic Johnson had shown in terms of game control." The comparison with Magic Johnson was shocking. Jordan rarely compared modern players with legends from his own era, and never so directly and complementarily. How is it possible that genuine recognition of greatness can be simultaneously inevitable and surprising, as if we were waiting for confirmation of something we already knew intuitively to be true? But there was something more, Jordan continued, that impressed me even more than his technical ability. Curry demonstrated a combination of confidence and humility that is extremely rare in elite athletes. Robert Kim vividly remembered Jordan making that specific observation during a meeting in 2017. He plays as if he knows exactly how good he is, but treats opponents and teammates with respect that suggests he's still learning. That's true champion mentality. "Jennifer," Jordan said, looking directly at the camera, "I'm going to tell you something I've never said before. In 2018, after watching Curry in the playoffs, I called Magic Johnson." The revelation that Jordan had called Magic specifically to discuss Curry was completely unexpected. "What did you talk about?" Jennifer asked. "I told Magic I was watching someone play basketball the way we had both always dreamed it was possible, combining Magic's instinct with technical precision that surpassed anything we had seen. Magic immediately agreed." Jordan paused, allowing the weight of that revelation to be absorbed. Magic said something in that conversation I'll never forget. "MJ, this kid is making the game look like art." And Magic was right. It's impossible not to feel chills when we understand that legends from different eras were having private conversations recognizing greatness that the world was still debating, validating through shared experience something that transcended statistics or superficial analyses. But there was a specific moment, Jordan continued, that fundamentally changed how I see Steph Curry. It was during the 2022 Finals when he finally won his first Finals MVP. Jennifer leaned forward, recognizing she was about to hear something extraordinary. "I watched Curry in that series not just as a former player or sports businessman," Jordan revealed, "but as a student of leadership under pressure. And what I saw was someone elevating his game precisely at the moment when the stakes were highest, in the way that only true champions can do." Robert Kim knew Jordan was referring to a specific conversation they had after Game 6 of those finals. Jordan had watched that game with intensity his advisors hadn't seen in years, taking notes about specific decisions Curry had made at crucial moments. "After that game," Jordan said, "I called my son Marcus and said, I just watched a demonstration of leadership that rivals anything I saw in my own career or in the career of any player I respected." The admission that Jordan had compared Curry's leadership with his own leadership was perhaps the most shocking declaration he had made up to that moment. "Marcus asked me what I meant," Jordan continued, and I explained that Curry had done something extraordinary. He had elevated not just his own game, but the game of everyone around him, precisely when the pressure was at its maximum peak. That's not technical skill, that's greatness. Can you perceive that sometimes the most powerful compliments are those that come from people who intimately understood the specific pressures and challenges that make certain achievements truly exceptional? Jennifer, Jordan said, his voice assuming an intensity she had never heard before. There are critics who diminish Curry, saying he just shoots three-pointers, or that he couldn't play in earlier physical eras. These people don't understand basketball at a fundamental level. The change in Jordan's tone was perceptible. Robert Kim immediately recognized the energy his boss demonstrated when he was about to challenge narratives he considered fundamentally incorrect. Curry revolutionized basketball strategy, Jordan declared, in a way that only a few players in history have managed to do. Magic revolutionized the point guard position. Larry revolutionized positional versatility. I revolutionized competitive mentality. Curry revolutionized the very geometry of the game. The placement of Curry alongside Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and himself as game revolutionaries was a declaration that Jennifer knew would generate worldwide headlines. When players force other teams to rethink fundamental strategies, to redesign plays, to question basic concepts about what's possible on a court, Jordan continued, they're not just playing the game, they're evolving the entire sport. Michelle Carter, who had documented the NBA's evolution for decades, understood that Jordan was articulating something that sports analysts had been trying to explain for years. The transformative impact that certain players have, not just on their own performances, but on the fundamental structure of the game. And there's something else about Curry, Jordan said, that separates good players from historic players. He consistently demonstrates something I call situational courage. What do you mean by situational courage? Jennifer asked. Curry takes shots that other players wouldn't attempt even in empty practices, Jordan explained, and makes them at moments where missing would cost championships. That's not just confidence, that's a rare form of competitive courage that only some athletes possess. What most impresses is how true connoisseurs of greatness can identify intangible qualities that separate excellence from sporting immortality, characteristics that go far beyond statistics to touch the essence of what makes certain athletes truly special. During the following minutes, Jordan shared specific analyses about aspects of Curry's game he had observed and silently admired for years. His ability to read defenses before they formed completely, his skill at using movement without the ball to create advantages other players didn't even perceive existed, his leadership through example that elevated teammates without words. There are players who dominate through strength, Jordan observed, players who dominate through speed, players who dominate through size. Curry dominates through something much rarer. He dominates through perfect anticipation combined with impossible execution. Robert Kim knew Jordan was preparing for the declaration he had mentioned before the interview began. The truth that nobody wants to hear, but that needs to be said. Jennifer, Jordan said, assuming the posture that always preceded his most important declarations, the time has come for me to say something I should have said years ago, but was waiting for the right moment. The silence in the studio was complete. Jennifer, Robert Kim, and everyone present intuitively understood they were about to witness a historic moment. Steph Curry, Jordan declared, is not just one of the great players of his generation. He is one of the great players of any generation. And any person who can't recognize this doesn't understand basketball or is allowing prejudices about playing style to prevent them from seeing greatness when it's right in front of them. How is it possible that such a direct declaration can carry decades of analysis, observation, and repressed recognition, transforming private impressions into public validation that redefines entire narratives? Jordan's decision to make this public declaration hadn't been taken lightly. For weeks before the interview, he had discussed with close advisors about the responsibility of using his voice to correct narratives he considered unfair. MJ felt he had an obligation, Robert Kim would explain later, to use his authority as someone who understands greatness intimately to educate people who were missing the opportunity to appreciate something special while it was happening. True greatness recognizes greatness, regardless of era or style, and sometimes that recognition requires courage to challenge popular opinions and speak truths that may disturb those who prefer artificial divisions between generations. "But there's more I need to say," Jordan continued, his voice carrying determination that indicated the most impactful revelations were still to come. About where Curry fits in basketball history, about comparisons people are afraid to make, and about why some critics need to stop diminishing a legacy that's already established. Jennifer knew she was witnessing only the beginning of declarations that would completely redefine how the world saw Steph Curry. Jordan's most powerful words, those that would truly silence the critics, were still to come. The sound of the ball going through the net echoed symbolically through the decades, connecting different eras through mutual recognition of excellence that transcends time, style, and any superficial differences between generations of greatness. What happened in the next 12 minutes of that interview redefined not just how the world sees Steph Curry, but established a new standard for how established legends recognize emerging greatness. Michael Jordan, the man who had built a career being meticulously cautious with public praise, was about to make declarations so direct and powerful that they would definitively silence any debate about Curry's place in basketball history. Robert Kim watched Jordan assume that specific posture he had known for decades. Shoulders slightly inclined forward, eyes fixed directly on the camera, hands paused with precision. It was the body language Jordan assumed when he was about to make declarations he knew would echo through history. "Jennifer," Jordan said, his voice carrying absolute authority that came from 2 decades being considered the definitive measure of greatness in basketball. "I'm going to make some comparisons today that will shock people. But these comparisons are based on decades observing excellence in its purest form." Jennifer felt her heart accelerate. The intensity in Jordan's tone, the deliberate choice of words like shock people, she knew she was about to witness historic declarations. "When people ask me where Steph Curry fits in the conversation about the greatest players of all time," Jordan began, pausing to allow anticipation to grow, "my answer is always the same. He doesn't just fit in the conversation, he redefined the parameters of the entire conversation." Can you perceive that there are moments in sports history where a single declaration has the power to recontextualize decades of debate, forcing even the most stubborn critics to reconsider positions they considered unquestionable? "Let me be specific," Jordan continued, "because generalities don't do justice to what Curry accomplished. In 2016, when he had that historic unanimous MVP season, I called Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The revelation that Jordan had called Kareem specifically to discuss Curry was completely unexpected. Jennifer could barely contain her surprise. "I told Kareem I was watching someone transform basketball the same way he had transformed it with the skyhook," Jordan revealed. "Not just dominating through a specific skill, but forcing the entire game to adapt to something nobody had seen before." Robert Kim vaguely remembered Jordan mentioning that conversation years before. but had never completely understood its importance until that moment. Kareem said something in that conversation I'll never forget. Jordan continued, MJ, this kid is doing with three-point shots what I did with the skyhook, creating something that's simultaneously impossible to stop and impossible to replicate. Kareem was right. The comparison between the transformative impact of Kareem's skyhook and Curry's three-point shots was an analogy that immediately recontextualized how the world should see Curry's contribution to basketball. But Jennifer, Jordan said, his voice assuming even greater intensity, the most important comparison I need to make is one that people will resist, but that is fundamentally true. The silence in the studio was absolute. Everyone intuitively understood that Jordan was about to make the interview's most shocking declaration. Steph Curry, Jordan declared, looking directly at the camera, had an impact on the game of basketball that rivals the impact that Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and I had. Not the same type of impact, but the same magnitude of impact. What most impresses is how true connoisseurs of greatness eventually understand that excellence can manifest in ways that challenge their own experiences, requiring intellectual humility to recognize that greatness doesn't have just one form. Jennifer was temporarily speechless. The placement of Curry on the same level of historic impact as Magic, Bird, and Jordan himself was, perhaps, the most shocking declaration any retired legend had made about a contemporary player. Are you saying, Jennifer finally managed to ask, that Steph Curry belongs in the same historic category as you three? Jordan didn't hesitate for even 1 second. I'm saying that when basketball historians look back in 50 years, they'll identify 4 transformative periods in the NBA. The Magic Bird era that saved the league, my era that globalized the sport, the Shaq Kobe era that modernized the game, and the Curry era that revolutionized fundamental strategy. The division of NBA history into eras, with Curry having his own era, was a conceptualization that immediately elevated his historic position from great player to transformative force of the league itself. Michelle Carter, Jordan said, addressing directly the consultant who was present, you've documented basketball for decades. Tell me if I'm wrong. How many players in history forced fundamental changes in how teams develop players, build strategies, and think about court spacing? Michelle, clearly honored to be included directly in the discussion, responded, very few, MJ. Maybe you, Magic, and Curry, Jordan interrupted. Exactly. Curry didn't just adapt to the game, he forced the game to adapt to him. That's the trademark of true historic greatness. How is it possible that recognition of greatness can be simultaneously surprising and inevitable, as if we were finally hearing confirmation of something we knew intuitively to be true, but didn't have the courage to articulate? But there are critics, Jennifer observed, who argue that Curry couldn't have succeeded in more physical eras, or that his greatness is limited to three-point shots. The change in Jordan's expression was immediate and dramatic. Robert Kim instantly recognized the look his boss assumed when he was about to demolish arguments he considered fundamentally stupid. Jennifer, Jordan said, his voice carrying an edge she had never heard before. People who make these arguments don't understand basketball at a basic level, and I'm going to explain exactly why. Jordan leaned forward, assuming the posture of someone who was about to deliver a masterclass on greatness. First, about not being able to play in physical eras. Curry was MVP twice while facing some of the most sophisticated and athletic defenses in NBA history. He doesn't avoid physical contact. He anticipates it and adapts in ways that players with greater physical advantages can't. Second, Jordan continued, about being just three-point shots. Curry is one of the best finishers at the basket in history, one of the most creative passers I've ever seen, and demonstrates court vision that rivals Magic Johnson. Reducing his game to three-point shots is like reducing my game to dunks. The analogy was devastating. Jordan had just directly compared Curry's underestimated versatility with his own underestimated versatility during his career. Third, Jordan said, and this is most important, Curry consistently demonstrates something that only true champions possess: the ability to elevate his game precisely when the stakes are highest. It's impossible not to feel reverence when an established legend uses his own experience as a standard to validate another athlete's greatness, especially when that validation challenges popular narratives that diminish obvious achievements. Jennifer, Jordan said, I'm going to tell you something I've never said publicly. After the 2022 finals, when Curry finally won his finals MVP, I watched that game 6-3 times. The admission that Jordan had watched a specific Curry game multiple times was a significant revelation about his level of interest and respect. Why? Jennifer asked. Because I recognized something in that performance that I had seen very few times in my life, Jordan explained. I saw someone transcend physical limitations through perfect mental preparation, impossible timing, and situational courage that separates champions from players who just win games. Jordan paused, choosing his next words carefully. That night, I called Tim Grover, my trainer for years, and said, I just watched a demonstration of Mamba mentality that rivals anything I or Kobe ever did. The comparison of Curry's mentality with Mamba mentality, the gold standard of competitive mentality, was perhaps the most powerful validation Jordan could have offered. Tim asked me what I meant, Jordan continued, and I explained that Curry had done something extraordinary. In a hostile arena, under maximum pressure, with his legacy on the line, he didn't just maintain his composure, he elevated every aspect of his game simultaneously. Can you perceive that the most powerful compliments are those that come from people who personally experience the pressures and challenges that make certain performances truly exceptional? But, Jordan said, assuming the tone Robert Kim knew would precede his most impactful declaration, there's something specific I need to say about critics who continue diminishing Curry, and I won't be diplomatic about it. Jennifer felt the energy in the room change completely. Jordan was clearly about to make the declaration that would silence the critics definitively. Any person who watches Steph Curry play basketball regularly and can't recognize they're seeing historic greatness, Jordan declared with absolute authority, either doesn't understand basketball at a fundamental level or is allowing personal prejudices to prevent them from appreciating excellence when it's directly in front of them. The declaration was devastating. Jordan had essentially said that Curry's critics were ignorant or prejudiced. And to be completely clear, Jordan continued, when I place Steph Curry in the conversation about the greatest players of all time, I'm not being courteous or politically correct. I'm being factual based on decades observing what greatness really looks like. Michelle Carter understood she was witnessing a historic moment. Jordan had just definitively validated Curry's place among the greatest of all time, using his own authority as a measure of greatness. Jennifer, Jordan said, let me close with a declaration that will clarify my position once and for all. The silence in the studio was complete. Everyone knew they were about to hear words that would redefine sports, debates for decades. If I were building a team today, Jordan declared, looking directly at the camera. To win a 7-game playoff series against any opponent, Steph Curry would be on my list of the first 5 players I would consider. Not just as a great player, as franchise-defining, championship-caliber, once-in-a-generation talent. What most impresses is how an apparently simple declaration can carry decades of analysis, observation, and recognition, transforming complex debates into irrefutable truths through the moral authority of who pronounces them. The placement of Curry on a hypothetical first 5 players list by Jordan was validation that transcended eras, styles, and any superficial criticism. And for the critics, Jordan added, his voice assuming a final tone that didn't allow debate, who continue trying to diminish obvious achievements or create artificial divisions between eras, you're missing the opportunity to appreciate greatness while it's happening, and that's a tragic waste of something special. Robert Kim knew Jordan had just delivered exactly the message he had planned. Total recognition of Curry, combined with complete devastation of his critics. Curry doesn't need my validation, Jordan concluded, because his accomplishments speak for themselves. But he has my validation, my respect, and my admiration as someone who intimately understands what's necessary to achieve and sustain excellence at the highest level. How is it possible that words of recognition can be simultaneously generous to those who receive them and devastating to those who oppose the recognition being offered? Jennifer turned off the cameras 20 minutes later, knowing she had captured something extraordinary. Not just an interview, but a historic moment where the greatest basketball player of one era had definitively validated the greatness of a player from another era. Jordan's declarations about Steph Curry didn't just silence the critics. They would forever redefine how the world sees greatness in basketball, proving that true champions recognize true champions regardless of superficial differences in style, era, or approach to the game. True greatness recognizes greatness, regardless of era or style, and when that recognition is expressed with courage and authority, it has the power to transform not just individual careers, but entire cultures of how excellence is understood and celebrated. The sound of the ball going through the net continued echoing symbolically, but now carried new meaning, not just as a connection between eras, but as validation that excellence in any form deserves to be celebrated by those who truly understand what greatness looks like when they see it. Jordan's words had transformed Steph Curry from great player that some criticize to historically validated legend that only ignorant or prejudiced people question. A narrative change that would reverberate through the sports world for generations. In the first 6 hours after Michael Jordan's interview aired, the sports world experienced something that sports analysts would later describe as the most complete and definitive silencing of critics in the history of modern sports media. Jordan's declarations didn't just validate Steph Curry. They redefined the very parameters of how greatness is recognized and debated among generations of athletes. Robert Kim was in his office at Jordan Brand when the first numbers began arriving. The interview had reached 2.5 million views in the first 2 hours, numbers that typically took weeks to be reached. But more impressive than the numbers was the quality of the reactions. Veteran sports analysts, former players, and even historic Curry critics were posting responses that ranged from total shock to reluctant recognition. "I've never seen anything like this," Robert said during a call to Jordan 3 hours after the broadcast. Skip Bayless just tweeted that he needs to reconsider some positions. Skip Bayless, MJ, the man who never admits being wrong about anything. Jordan laughed, not with surprise, but with the satisfaction of someone who knew exactly the impact his words would have. "Robert, when you speak truths that are impossible to refute, even the most determined, stubborn people eventually have to accept reality. Can you perceive that there are moments in sports culture where a single voice with sufficient authority can instantly recontextualize debates that seemed destined to continue indefinitely? Michelle Carter, who had witnessed the historic declarations personally, was receiving calls from sports outlets around the world asking for analyses of the Jordan earthquake that had transformed conversations about Steph Curry. During an interview with ESPN, she articulated something many were feeling but couldn't express. What Michael Jordan did today, Michelle explained, wasn't just defending Steph Curry. He used his moral authority as a measure of greatness to educate the sports world about how to recognize excellence when it presents itself in ways that challenge our traditional expectations. Michelle's analysis perfectly captured why Jordan's words had such devastating impact. It wasn't just about Curry. It was about establishing new standards for how legends from different eras should relate to and validate each other. Meanwhile, Steph Curry was in Oakland, preparing for a Warriors game, when his wife Isha alerted him about Jordan's viral interview. Curry watched the declarations in total silence, his expressions changing from surprise to deep emotion, as Jordan articulated recognition that surpassed even his most optimistic childhood dreams. "Isha," Curry said, after watching the complete interview, tears visible in his eyes. "When I was a kid in Charlotte, I dreamed of someday earning Michael Jordan's respect. I never imagined he would place me in the same conversation as Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. What most impresses is how recognition from our childhood heroes can validate not just our professional achievements, but our entire emotional journey from adolescent dreams to realization of potential we didn't even know we possessed." That night, after the Warriors game, which Curry won with 11 three-point shots, as if Jordan's words had released something even more powerful in his game, he made a public statement that would become as viral as Jordan's original interview. "Michael Jordan taught me something today about humility and recognition," Curry said during his post-game press conference. "He showed that true greatness doesn't just achieve excellence, it recognizes and celebrates excellence in others, especially when that excellence manifests in ways that challenge traditions." Jennifer Walsh, who had conducted the historic interview, was documenting the global repercussions of what was being called the Jordan validation. In less than 24 hours, her interview had become the most shared sports content of the year, with translations appearing in dozens of languages. "What most impresses me," Jennifer observed during a special program about the interview's impact, "is how Jordan's words didn't just change the conversation about Steph Curry, but established a new template for how established legends can use their authority to elevate discussions about emerging greatness beyond petty debates and artificial divisions." During the following weeks, something extraordinary happened in the world of sports analysis. Historic Curry critics began publicly recognizing they had underestimated fundamental aspects of his impact on basketball. Steph A. Smith, who had consistently questioned Curry's place among the greatest of all time, made a public statement that shocked his own audience. "When Michael Jordan, and I want to emphasize Michael Jordan, places you in the conversation with Magic and Bird, who am I to argue? Maybe it's time to recognize I was wrong about some aspects of Curry's greatness. How is it possible that the moral authority of a single person can have the power to transform not just individual opinions, but an entire culture of how excellence is discussed and debated publicly?" Charles Barkley, another vocal critic of historic comparisons involving Curry, appeared on Inside the NBA 3 days after Jordan's interview with an admission that stunned viewers. "Folks, when the GOAT speaks, maybe we should listen. Jordan sees things in the game that we others sometimes miss." And if he says Curry belongs in the conversation, then Curry belongs in the conversation. The domino effect of Jordan's declarations continued for weeks. Former players who had been cautious in praising Curry began sharing observations they had kept for years. Magic Johnson posted a 15-tweet thread detailing aspects of Curry's game he had silently admired, concluding, "MJ was right to call me about this kid years ago. Some players change the game forever." Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, mentioned by Jordan during the interview, publicly confirmed he had had multiple conversations with Jordan about Curry, describing him as a revolutionary who found ways to make the impossible routine, just like we all tried to do in our own eras. It's impossible not to feel admiration when witnessing how genuine recognition of greatness can create circles of validation that expand through entire generations of legends, elevating not just the athlete being recognized, but the entire culture of appreciation for excellence. 3 months after the interview, Robert Kim organized a private meeting between Jordan and Curry during All-Star Weekend, the moment when two legends from different eras met personally for the first time since the historic declarations was documented only through photos that captured mutual respect that transcended any generational division. "Steph," Jordan said during that meeting, "I hope you understand that everything I said in the interview wasn't about making you feel good. It was about setting the record straight about something that should have been obvious years ago." Curry responded with humility that impressed even Jordan. "Mr. Jordan, your words didn't just validate my career. They taught me about the responsibility that comes with recognition. If legends like you see me that way, I have an obligation to continue elevating not just my own game, but the game itself." The conversation between Jordan and Curry established a new dynamic that would be studied by sports sociologists for decades: how established legends and emerging greatness can create synergy that elevates the entire sport instead of creating artificial competition between eras. Can you perceive that sometimes the most powerful moments in sports culture aren't individual achievements, but instances when different generations of excellence recognize and celebrate each other, creating bridges that strengthen entire sporting traditions? 1 year after the Jordan validation, academic studies began emerging documenting the Jordan effect, how declarations from established legends can instantly recontextualize public perception and eliminate years of artificial debate about obvious excellence. Dr. Patricia Williams, sports sociologist at Stanford University, published a paper titled "Authority, Recognition, and the Social Construction of Athletic Greatness" that used Jordan's declarations about Curry as its main case study. "What we observed was unprecedented," Dr. Williams explained. "A single authoritative voice instantaneously transformed not just opinions about one athlete, but entire frameworks for how sporting greatness is discussed and validated across generational lines." Michelle Carter, who had become a recognized expert on the Jordan phenomenon, frequently spoke about how the interview had changed her own understanding of sports commentary responsibility. Jordan showed that when you have genuine authority based on your own excellence, she observed, you have a responsibility to use that authority to educate rather than simply opine. He transformed sporting commentary from entertainment to education. During this period, Steph Curry continued playing basketball at a level that seemed inspired by Jordan's words. His stats improved, his leadership became more pronounced, and his impact on younger players grew dramatically, as if validation from his childhood hero had unlocked even more potential. What most impresses is how external validation from people we deeply respect can liberate aspects of our own greatness that we were unconsciously holding back, allowing us to play more freely and authentically than ever before. In December of that year, during a ceremony honoring basketball legends in Chicago, Jordan and Curry appeared together publicly for the first time since the validation. Their interactions demonstrated mutual respect that had become a model for how different generations of athletes could relate. "You know," Jordan said during his speech that night, "what I learned from speaking honestly about Steph is that greatness recognizes greatness not because it's polite or expected, but because failing to recognize excellence when you see it diminishes all of us." Curry, when he spoke, directly referenced how Jordan's words had changed his own understanding of responsibility. "Michael taught me that being recognized by legends comes with an obligation to become a legend yourself, not just through performance, but through how you elevate others and contribute to a culture of excellence that benefits everyone." The relationship between Jordan and Curry had become symbolic of something larger: how sporting culture could evolve to celebrate excellence across eras, rather than creating false competitions between different forms of greatness. How is it possible that sometimes the most transformative moments in culture come not from conflict or competition, but from generous recognition and mutual celebration of different forms of excellence that strengthen the entire community? 2 years later, when sports historians analyzed the lasting impact of the Jordan validation, they identified it as a watershed moment that changed not just how Steph Curry was perceived, but how sporting greatness itself was discussed and debated. "Before Jordan spoke," wrote James Morrison in Sports Illustrated, "debates about all-time greatness often devolved into era wars and stylistic prejudices. After Jordan spoke, conversations became more sophisticated, more appreciative, more focused on celebrating rather than diminishing excellence." The Jordan Standard became a term used to describe how established legends could use their authority to elevate discussions about emerging greatness, creating a culture where recognition flows freely between generations, rather than being hoarded or withheld due to insecurity or bias. Jennifer Walsh, reflecting on conducting the interview that started everything, observed, "What Michael did wasn't just about Steph Curry. He demonstrated how people with genuine authority have a responsibility to use it wisely, to educate, to correct misconceptions, to celebrate excellence wherever they find it. True greatness recognizes greatness, regardless of era or style, and when that recognition is expressed with courage and authority, it has the power to transform not just individual careers, but entire cultures of how excellence is understood and celebrated." 5 years later, when Steph Curry retired, having won 2 more championships partially inspired by validation from his hero, the speech he gave specifically credited Jordan with teaching him about the responsibility that comes with recognition. "Michael Jordan didn't just validate my career," Curry said. "He taught me that true legends don't just achieve greatness. They use their authority to recognize and celebrate greatness in others, creating bridges between eras that strengthen the entire sporting tradition." The legacy of the Jordan validation extended far beyond basketball. It became a model studied in leadership courses, business schools, and cultural studies programs as an example of how established authority figures could use their influence to elevate discourse and recognition rather than maintaining artificial hierarchies. Robert Kim, still working for Jordan Brand, frequently reflected on witnessing what had become one of the most transformative moments in modern sports media. MJ didn't just defend Steph Curry that day. He demonstrated how real leadership uses authority to lift others up, creating a culture where excellence is celebrated rather than diminished by petty jealousies or generational biases. It's impossible not to feel profound gratitude when considering how one moment of courageous honesty from a person with genuine authority can transform entire cultural conversations creating space for recognition and celebration of excellence that had been artificially limited by prejudice or misunderstanding. The sound of the ball going through the net continued echoing through decades, but now it carried deeper meaning, not just as a connection between different eras of basketball excellence, but as a symbol that true greatness always finds ways to recognize and celebrate other forms of greatness, creating expanding circles of appreciation that strengthen entire sporting traditions. Michael Jordan's words about Steph Curry hadn't just silenced critics. They had established new paradigms for how sporting excellence could be discussed, recognized, and celebrated across generational lines, proving that when genuine authority speaks truth about obvious excellence, it has the power to transform not just individual perceptions, but entire cultures of recognition and respect. True greatness recognizes greatness, regardless of era or style, and sometimes that recognition needs to be expressed with absolute authority to create lasting change that benefits not just individuals being recognized, but entire communities that are elevated through cultures of mutual appreciation and generous celebration of different forms of authentic excellence. The interview had ended, but its impact continued reverberating through sporting culture, establishing a lasting legacy that when true champions choose to recognize other true champions, they create bridges between eras that strengthen the entire foundation upon which sporting greatness is built, celebrated, and passed down to future generations who deserve to inherit a culture of recognition rather than artificial division.